Going on this. All right, good evening, everyone. I am Jill Porter, the library director, pinch hitting for Don tonight as he does his family history talk on the Ancestry Library Edition. Ancestry is at the Library Edition is actually free of charge to the public through the end of the year. They may extend this, and the neat thing about the Library Edition is that it offers some bells and whistles that aren't available on the normal free version. And the other good thing about this is that you will be able to access it remotely, which is awfully important right now. And Don and I were just talking about the schedule for the next couple of months. And next month in December, Don will be talking about Heritage Quest, one of our other online databases. And in January, we are hoping that Maida Hess, our adult services coordinator, who is returning from maternity leave, will be talking about Clio and all the annuals that we have online. Don, did you want to take it away?
I can do that.
Okay.
Well, this is such a switch, not being able to see faces and not knowing who I'm talking to. So if I talk fast, send up a warning. Jill will see it and she'll let me know.
I will be monitoring the chat. Yep.
Okay, and I may make my face disappear during part of the talk because it might be over the top of what I want you to see. And I'm not sure if you're going to see it in exactly the same spot, but I figure if it goes away, that will take care of the problem. The other thing is, because I can't see the questions, if you have questions, put them in the chat box. Jill will see them, and we'll probably just try to answer all of the questions at the end of the presentation. And with that, I will go ahead and get started. What I'd like to talk about tonight is how to access the Ancestry Library Edition at the library and from home. And as Jill mentioned, this is a unique exception. Typically, Ancestry Library Edition is available only in the library. Because of the COVID pandemic back in March, they made it available for people to use from home, provided they could log in using a library card. And we'll go through and explain and show you how you can do that. We'll talk about some of the key features on the website. It really is the Ancestry platform. For people that are familiar with Ancestry, it'll be a piece of cake. For those that aren't, we'll try to go through it so everybody has a good basic understanding of where to find things. We'll also talk a little bit about a pedigree chart. When I wrote the description for this, I talked about this being set up for beginners and intermediate. Pedigree chart is really an important part of your family history research, kind of gives you the roadmap for doing future researching. So we'll talk about that a bit. We'll talk a little bit about the genealogical standards as far as how to record names, dates, places. We'll talk about message boards and some of the ways of searching them. And then we'll talk about how you use the basic and advanced search features on Ancestry, how you save and send things that you're lucky enough to find. And there are lots of things to find, so I expect everybody will find something. But you can either save them to your computer while you're working at home, or if you're using this at the library, then you can send them home to yourself so you can store them on your own computer. Because I like to talk about the good research techniques, we're going to use one example of a census search and talk about developing a research plan to find that. And then I can't talk about doing family history without mentioning that it's important to document your sources. No matter what method you use, you're going to come up with that plan, okay? So talking about ProQuest again, I thought I'd share this. This is actually the news release that went out in September from ProQuest, saying that Ancestry Library Edition would be temporarily available for the public at home. And you can see that they said it would be available until December 31st, and then they would reevaluate it on a monthly basis as needed. I expect with things locking down again right now across the country that they probably will have an extension of that so people can continue to use this at home. And if not remember that it's always available through the library, and when the library is back open, the reference service desk people would be glad to help you get logged in and answer questions. And if there's questions that you want more help with, when things get back to normal, I'll be at the library on Tuesdays from 10 to 2, and you can come in and we can work one-on-one to get your research done, started, or get you on the right track. So accessing it is really easy, whether you're in the library at home, because the library is in the process of putting together a new web page. And if you look at the home page for the Marshfield Public Library now and go underneath the navigation bar, if you click on services, it will bring down a drop-down box where you can just go down the list and you see genealogy, history, and research as a link. And when you click on that, it will bring up the resources that are available through the Marshfield Public Library. And if you scroll down near the bottom of the page right now, you'll see Ancestry Library and Heritage Quest. And all you have to do is click on Ancestry Library. It's a link, and it will take you to the South Central Library System homepage. Excuse me, not the homepage, but the page for logging in. And they require you to put your library card number in. Once you enter that into the login box, it will take you to the home page for Ancestry Library Edition. Now, because I wasn't sure if we'd have some people from Wisconsin Rapids or Marathon County join us, I wanted to show you that this works the same for every library. They may have it in a different location, but it works identically. So Macmillan Memorial Library is part of the South Central Library System, and you find their resources listed under more resources. And if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you'll see Ancestry. And on the Marathon County website, you go to online resources, you scroll down a ways, and you'll see their Ancestry Library Edition. I have them circled both there. So you click on Ancestry Library Edition from either site, and it will bring up the box that you have to put your library card number in. South Central Library System, again, that's the same as what we use at Marshfield. You just put your code in and it will take you to the page. And then with the Wisconsin Valley Library login, put the barcode in from your library card, enter the PIN, and hit submit. And then you come to the Ancestry Library homepage. And it even looks and feels like the Ancestry subscription page. It's different, but when you look at it, you recognize right away that it's an Ancestry product. So when you look at the home page, across the top is the header, and the header is usually where you're going to find the logo, and you can see the Ancestry Library logo up across the top. And that bar has what is referred to as the navigation bar, and usually the navigation bar stays in view no matter what page you're on. And so if you want to go back to the home page, you click on home and it takes you back. We're going to talk about the navigation bar in just a little bit because I think that's an important thing to become familiar with. They also have on this page what they call featured collections. And if you look down on the bottom, you see search census, search vitals, search military, search immigration. And those are kind of featured collections. And what they do is they apply links to your searches right away. So when you click on search the census, you're going to be looking just at census records. If you click on search vitals, you're going to be looking at birth, death, and marriages. Search military, you'll be pulling up Civil War, World War II, World War I, Revolutionary War type records. And then search immigration will give your immigration and information from there. Now, one of the things about this particular page, when you look at it, is there's a lot of duplication. And so if you look down at the bottom where it says quick links here, you'll see that you can click on message boards, and message boards is also across the top in the navigation bar. If you click on military, you'll see military is linked to one of the featured collection pages. So there's lots of ways to get into the same place on Ancestry Library Edition. we can't talk about everything that's listed in quick links tonight. There's just too much. And if we tried, I would either bore you to death or we would get lost in minutia. So tonight we're going to try to hit some of the highlights and keep this to about 35, 40 minutes and then have time for questions. Okay, so we're going to start by going up to the navigation bar and start talking from right to left about what each of these different parts of the library edition do for us. So we'll start with the new collections, and the new collections is actually a link to the library card. And I'm going to hide my face for a little bit because that upper right hand corner is kind of important for right now. And I hope everybody can still see the entire screen instead of having to look at my face. What you get when you pull this particular page up is you will actually go to the card catalog, and there's two main columns in the card catalog, kind of divided in right and left. The right side is the whiter area on the screen, and what it does is it lists all the databases. And then on the left side, which is immediately to the right, you see the title and keyword search across the top, and underneath that are some filter boxes. You can filter the collection, filter by collection, by location, by date, or by language. So this is what you get to when you first click on new collection. Now, when you open it up, it's sorted based on the date of updates. And so if you look on the far right-hand column there, you'll see new, and updated. That's what they're telling you. It's either a new database in the collection or it's an older database that has had additional records added to it or something that makes them consider it an update. So that's the first column. The second column from the right is the number of records in that particular database. And some of these have 4,956 for the third one down, and some of them go into the millions and even some into the billions of records that are available to search. Then the next line is the next column is the collection that this particular database has been assigned to. And so what that tells you is if you're going to search for school directories, you will end up pulling up the West Midland, England police files and ledgers. So, and if you want to know when that was done, okay, you click on the database title. We got these sorted. If you look at the title, if you put your cursor over the top of the title, it will bring up this box that tells you the name of the database, when it was published, and when it was updated. One of the things I think is important to know is that Ancestry is updating things an awful lot. I put this slide together a couple days ago. Today's the 18th. 5 days ago, I put this together. And when I went online today to look at it, there's a new title up above it that was added yesterday. So almost on a daily basis or a weekly basis, Ancestry is doing things to add more records for people to search. Now, when you talk or go through these records, you can also change the order, the way they're sorted. So what I just did real quickly was I went from sorting it by the activity, new or updated, to record count. And you can see that the collection of records that has the largest collection is actually what's referred to as the public member trees. It's in the family tree collection, and there's 1,895,402,199 records there. I mean, that number seems almost overwhelming, but actually Ancestry makes it fairly easy to search through all these records and see what you can find. Okay. And again, I wanted to also point out, you can see that this was published on Ancestry for the first time in 2006, and it says it was updated in 2009. I think what they do here is because individuals are working on the trees, there's updates added to the trees that you can see, because I can see things I've added to some of my public trees since 2009. So I think the difference here is on the 2009 update, it's something they did behind the scenes, and then as people use it, they're still being updated by the additions that individuals are making to the trees themselves. The other thing you can do here is you can, filter the collections. And so if you look off to the side, I'm doing something wrong here. There we go. If you go over to the left-hand side and you get to the column where the filters are, you can filter by the collection, you can filter by the location, you can filter by the date, and also by the language. And now what I just did was I clicked somehow in here that I wanted to look at just census records. And you can see that we dropped from having that 10,000 number to 451. So there are 451 different databases related to census and voter list in that collection. So you can get down to narrowing it down if you want to search certain things by just clicking on the collection that you're looking at. Now, one of the things that you can do after that is you can even filter it further by selecting a date. You can be very specific and select a century. You could select a decade, or the actual year in some cases. For example, if you wanted to look at the 1870 federal census, by adding enough filters, you would be looking at just the 1870 census for the United States. I put this slide together because I wanted to show you the number of databases and the comparison between the database for the library edition and the database for the subscription service. Ancestry has multiple platforms that they provide for people. And the subscription service is really intended for the individual who wants to use things on a regular basis. And there's some convenient features like you can create a family tree, you can save records to the family tree. And they have a few more databases that you can research. But the library edition provides about a third, or it looks like they provide about a third of the databases for people to use at the library for free. So you can see 10,570 databases are available on the library edition, as opposed to 32,872 on a regular subscription for the Ancestry. Second to the right, the second column from the right is for charts and forms. And if you think about when you first started doing your family history, if you have been doing family history for a while, you know that there's lots of records that you're going to start looking at and lots of things to keep track of. So if you're a seasoned genealogist or family historian, you know that it's important to get organized as soon as you can. If you're getting into this for the first time and you haven't really started doing family history, one of the things to start doing is force yourself to document things as you go along. And Ancestry provides a number of charts on this particular site that are really good research aids to help you get going. First one is the Ancestral Chart. We'll talk about that in a little bit more. Then you can see the research calendar. You know, one of the things that's important to do as you're researching different things is to write down what you've asked or looked for and what you got back for results. Not everybody is going to stick with doing their family history on a daily basis from now until they can't do it anymore. And what happens typically is that someone will start searching for something. They'll step away from doing real active search, and then they'll come back and they'll say, okay, I'm going to look for this record. And when they get the record back from the agency they wrote to or the place they went to look at it, they say, that looks familiar. They get home and here they have that record in their collection already. The research calendar is really handy because it tells you what you've done, what you found, and it's an easy to look for resource that you can keep with your own records. I know that when I was first doing genealogy way back in the 1970s, I used to be notorious, almost obsessive, some people would say, about keeping track of what I was searching, who I was writing to, and what I got. what I got back for results. When I started working full-time, raising a family, I stepped away from doing family history. But when I started doing it again, I went back to those records and I could kind of pick up right where I left off, knowing what I'd already searched for and where the next steps were going to be. There's also a form here for research extract. If you are looking at a record or researching someplace where you can't get a copy of something, it's important to have some type of record created on what information you found. It's just kind of a summary, the key points, and then documenting the source of that information, where you found it, and how you might go back and re-find it. The correspondence record is really because you will find yourself asking lots of questions about of people. So you write lots of letters, you write to family. Once you get done writing to family, you're going to have to write to a courthouse or to a library. And the correspondence record is nice just to keep track of who you've written to and see when the results come back and what came back. And so if there's something that you feel is really important one day and you watch for it to get a response, you get a response back that doesn't give you the information, then you can think about, okay, now where's another place that I can go to find that same information? So the correspondence calendar or record kind of keeps you on track with looking for specific pieces of information. The two other records are the family group sheet and the source summary. Now, some people use a family group sheet to record information on the family units. So for example, on a family group sheet, you'd find myself, my wife, and our two children listed on there. Our parents listed as the parents of Vicky and the parents of me. And that's a family group sheet and the information on it. Now, the record that you download from Ancestry doesn't have a space to record the resources or the source of the information. Now, if it's going to be myself, it's going to be that I'm providing the source information. I know that information because I live that information. I remember which day I got married, although sometimes it's pulling it. But you can document your sources for things that you know firsthand by just recording that it's firsthand knowledge. When you start going back and researching generations before you, it's important to write down where you got that information. Now, on the family group sheet that Ancestry provides here, they don't have a space to put that directly on that form. Instead, they use this document called the source summary, where you record all the information of sources for a set of family group sheets. The Wisconsin State Genealogical Society and the National Genealogical Society years ago used a form that had small circles that were tied back to a link or back to the back page of the document that you could record the source for the information that you were entering. There was lots of zeros or lots of O's that you filled in a number, and then you could record the source on the back of the page. I really liked that form because it kept everything on one page rather than having two pages. But family group sheets are very important documents as you're going on with your research, and the source summary is important because you have to document sources. Now, I mentioned the pedigree chart or the ancestor chart, and I wanted to kind of show mine as an example. And the reason this one's important is because when you're doing your genealogy, when you're starting to do the genealogy, you always start with yourself and work backwards. And what typically happens for people is they can fill in the information on themselves. They can probably add their parents' information, maybe a little bit on the grandparents, and all at once they're coming up with, oh, I don't know what year grandpa was born. I don't know what city he was born in. I don't know what year they got married. Maybe you know the anniversary date, but you don't know the year. So what you start doing with this pedigree chart is you're going back, working known to unknown. And when you get to something that you don't know, you leave it blank. And pretty soon you have this nice sheet that's filled in with blank spaces. And those blank spaces actually make the roadmap for your research, because they tell you what pieces of information you need to go out and find. And when it comes to finding those pieces of information, it may be by talking to individuals, it may be going to libraries, it may be going to databases online, it may be going to Ancestry Library Edition or some other website and seeing what information you can find. Now, there's standard ways of filling in these forms, and it's important to kind of follow the genealogical standards, because then no matter who picks up the page and looks at it, they immediately know what they're looking at. So the first rule in filling out a pedigree sheet is that the father's name goes on the upper line, the mother's name goes on the lower line, and you just carry that through. So if you look at me there, I'm Donald Harold, and my dad was Donald W. His father was Roman Charles, and my great-grandfather was Charles. And you can see the name carrying on that top line for the male line of my family. When you go down to my mother's name, Gloria Spencer, if you follow her back, you can see her father was Harold, his father was William, and William's father was Robert. That would have been on the next page. But you can follow that line back by knowing that the father is always placed on the top and the mother's name is placed on the bottom. There's also some important rules as far as filling in the names, dates, and places. And I'll start with the name and then I'll go on to the next slide. Ideally, you are supposed to record the surname as a capital. So if you look at Donald Harold, those are lowercase, and my last name is put in uppercase because it stands out as being the surname then. I know not everybody follows that, but that was or is considered a genealogical standard. And what's nice about it is as you're looking at that sheet, the whole sheet, you can pick out every surname because they stand out. Now, when it comes to, besides the type font, lowercase versus uppercase, another thing that's important to remember is that when you record a woman's name, you record the woman's name as a maiden name. This is my grandmother, Elizabeth Angeline Guns. I always knew her as Grandma Spencer, but when it comes to recording the name, you want to include her birth name, and again, you want to put it in capital letters. Now, if I didn't know my grandmother's maiden name, I usually put 5 underscores so I know that when I'm looking at it that I don't have the last name. Also, you can sort it using some of the genealogy programs that way. Or you could leave it blank. As long as you don't put Angeline in there and capitalize it, people would know that you have the first and middle name and no last name given. As far as genealogical standard, when it comes to recording the dates, we're supposed to use 2 digits, 03. The month is a 3-letter abbreviation, FEB, and then the year is always 4 digits. And it's important to remember that when you start doing your family history, you may start off with the 1900s, but pretty soon you're going to be recording things in the 2000s. And if you're lucky, as you go back into the 1800s, 1700s, 1600s, and even sometimes further back than that. So there's a format for the dates, and it's always 2 digits, 3-letter abbreviation, and then the 4-digit year. And then when it comes to the locations are always listed as smallest to largest. And you'll see on Ancestry that if you start typing in Bellevue, for example, it will bring up Bellevue, Brown County, Wisconsin, USA. It's just the format that is supposed to be used, and it helps standardize the appearance. And it isn't uncommon to find out that somebody might have been born in a city that was named after a city in the state of Massachusetts, in the country of England. So you want to be very specific. And so local, county, state, and then the country. The other thing is that you'll find yourself transcribing this information from other sources. You may have someone send you a letter with the dates on it. When you want to transcribe something, you be really careful, because once you put a mistake into a record, very often it continues down the line. So you will find yourself transcribing documents. Always transcribe very carefully. And then still talking about the charts and forms, besides having the charts and forms related to the basic research forms. They also have a collection of census forms on Ancestry Library Edition. When you're searching census records, a lot of times when you're looking at that screen, you find yourself turning your head trying to read the language that's running a different direction than just across the screen. And the print is small, the image is usually bad, and so it makes it difficult to read it. What these forms are nice for is they give you a chance to have the headers all printed out nicely, and you can be looking at those, looking at the screen. And then a lot of times if you try to print that great big census record onto a little 8.5 by 11 sheet, the print gets so small. So by having these forms available, you can actually transcribe the information and record it on the form, making it easier to see and interpret when you're looking at things. Now, not only are there census forms available for each of the different census years, there are also census forms available for the United Kingdom censuses and also for the Canadian census records. And so their Ancestry is very nice about providing these things so you just quickly download them and use them. Then going back up to the navigation bar, we're going to go from the charts and forms to the Learning Center. And the Learning Center it's just some handy little research tips that they give you as far as how to get started doing the research on Ancestry's platform. And if you look at this, there's one on getting started, there's one on doing census research, another one on beyond the basics, and then, oops, wrong button, and then one on immigration, military, and ethnic records. And between these things, they're all written by some of the experts that work for Ancestry.com. And they give you between 1 and 8 pages of information about how to go about doing the most efficient search. And if you read them, they're pretty self-explanatory, step by step, how to do things. 1 to 8 pages, the two-page one, Ancestry Ann, she's got a 2-page one on just tips on doing searches, how to go from a basic search to an advanced search, how to put in locations, things like that to make your research experience on Ancestry more pleasant, more successful. And there's a little video there too. Then there's the longer one here. This is a 7-page one on just how to follow your family in a census record. One of the things to keep in mind when you're starting to look at census records, if somebody was born, I'm going to use William Upham for an example, in 1841, he died in 1924, you want to try to find every census record he would be on from 1850 to 1920. And so this particular little handout they have there actually goes through and shows you how to trace a family through each of the centennial years, the annual annual 10-year census, not annual, the 10-year census interval for the United States federal census records. So you go from 1920, 1910, 1900, and so on back to 1850 for Mr. Upham. They also have on this site one that kind of frustrated me because I remember it doing really cool things, but when I went to use it or to copy it, a link and show you, it didn't do those cool things anymore. But there was a research guide for counties or for states it was on both Ancestry Library Edition and it was on the Heritage Quest site. And if you clicked on the map, it would bring up a map of the United States, and you could click on the United States or on one of the particular states. It would give you a little bit of information like this shows here. Statehood in May 29th, 1848. There's 72 counties, Minnesota, Michigan, Illinois, and Iowa surrounded. That's nice. But in the version that I recall, when you clicked on it, Wisconsin would come up. It would show you when Wisconsin was just 2 counties. And then it would show you when there were 3 counties, 5 counties, 10 counties, until the 1940s when we created the last of our 72 counties. And what's important about finding a guide like that is if you're using or looking for census records or birth records or anything that would have been recorded in a county courthouse, you'll find out what years different things were created. So Wood County was 1856. If you are looking for a record for someone who lived in what is now Wood County today in 1856 or before 1856, you'd probably have to look at Brown County, because that was the county, one of the major counties early on. So you'd want to look at that map, and that map was really cool, but tonight it wasn't working, so I can't show it to you. Hopefully by next month, when we talk about Heritage Quest, we'll be able to show you that working. And then going back to the navigation bar, looking across the top, message boards. I don't know if message boards are used as much as they used to be or not. I was trying to figure that out in my head as I went through and looked at these. I always enjoyed message boards because they were an opportunity to look for other people to work with you. So when I think about doing family history, one of the things that I've always loved about family history is you find other people who are interested in family history and you share the work. And message boards are kind of one of the ways to put that word out, that you're working on something or looking at something or looking for something, and see what other people can do to help you collaborate. Share the load. You don't want to do everything by yourself. And I know over the years, I used message boards to come in contact with people from my Uncle Wallace's family, my great-great-uncle Wallace's family, from my great-great-aunt Dora's family. It was through message boards that we connected. And so I know that they were used a lot in the past. I still see current dates in the post, but I myself haven't been using them as much as I used to. Now, when it comes to searching message boards, you can do that on either the Ancestry Library Edition, or you can do it on the Ancestry Subscription Edition. The difference is with Library Edition, you can read, you can't really reply or post, and which is really disappointing when you think about a tool that's intended for helping you to collaborate. You have to work a little harder to collaborate using the Library Edition, but there's some good information that you can find. So I want to talk a little bit about the message boards, and I might go a little crazy here because I like message boards. So there's a couple slides here, and it may go, we'll just see how it goes, okay? So the first thing is, when you look at the message board, this is the home page for message boards. And you can see that you can either search the boards by name or keyword. You can just type in free text what you want. And so, for example, I put in the word logging. Those that know me probably know that I'm fairly actively involved in the Forest History Association of Wisconsin. So if I get a chance to look for something on logging, I'd want to see what I could find. Well, when I look at this, what scares me is 8,959 messages are mentioned in here related to logging. Well, that's too many things to look for. So you want to try to figure out ways to narrow that down. And if we go back to the good old-fashioned Boolean search, you can add things to help change it. So I wanted to look at logging in Wood County rather than logging in the state of Washington. So I put the operator in there and I put the quotation marks around Wood County, Wisconsin that would keep that or those three words together. And instead of getting almost 9,000 hits, I've got it down to 6. And so what you can do with the message board is you can manipulate your search by using some of these Boolean search factors. And we'll talk about other ways here in a minute. So that's the first thing. I also mentioned that I like to do things when I'm talking about family history, rather than talking about my family, talk about William H. Upham. Everybody who's from Marshfield probably knows that William H. Upham was considered Marshfield's most illustrious citizen. He came to Marshfield in 1878, built a sawmill, built a furniture factory, flour mill, just kept building. And actually, in a matter of a few years, he was the major employer for Marshfield and always has been considered one of the major benefactors for Marshfield. And he's the only man from Marshfield that ever served as governor. So it's nice to talk about him and share the history of him. You can see it. You put William H. Upham in here, you end up with 114 messages. Well, that's not too many, but you still want to be a little bit more specific. So again, what I did here was I just added the quotation marks around his name to keep that together. And we go from having 114 down to 4 messages. Now, looking at them, they're not all perfect matches, but the two in the middle, James Kellogg Upham, that was actually his name was James Kellogg, and he died at Mr. Upham's house when Mr. Upham lived in Angelica, Wisconsin. It was his sister-in-law's son. And then the James G. Blaine post in Marshfield was the Grand Army of the Republic post in Marshfield. And Mr. Upham was the first commander for it. And so you can see, you can find information that you really wouldn't have known that that's what you were looking for with message boards. And that's one of the kind of things that's nice surprise finds when you find them. You can also do an advanced search. And if you look off to the right where it says search, if you click on that, it toggles to the advanced search feature. And I'm going to close this down again for a second. And so when you do the advanced search, what you're looking for is there are some other little parameters in there that you can put in there to search for. And with the message classification, you can actually sort it by all of those different titles. Because a lot of the logging that's mentioned in these queries are people looking for family members who died as a result of logging accidents. I put obituaries down. And you can see we dropped that 9,000 names down to 945. Now these are still spread across the entire country, and we can talk about how we can narrow that down a little bit more later on. But what you see is by adding the classification, you've lowered it or narrowed the results, showing people who are being reported as dying. The first one, because I've got that in the way. Second one, it died in the woods. The third one, he was a blacksmith and he died. And so they go through and they talk about the different deaths that people had. And logging was not a safe occupation. There was a lot of risks to it. You can also use the free text to find boards about a specific topic. And if you look there, you could type anything you wanted in there. I was practicing or thinking about what I would look for, and every word I came up with actually was listed in the category down at the bottom of the page. It says topic categories. The list is pretty amazing what's there. If you click, oops, I guess I got ahead of myself. Well, I'm going to come back to the topic boards. The first thing is the surnames. Again, because we're looking at Mr. Upham for names here, if you're looking for surnames, underneath the surname list is an alphabet, and you can click on a letter of the alphabet and it will bring up other parts of the alphabet in alphabetical order. And if you see, you can go down to UP and put that one on there, and it brings up all the different names that are related to UP, and then the last part of the spelling of that name. If you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you can see there are 108 threads related to the Upham surname and 375 messages. Now those are going to be not sorted by region. It's just all across the country, people who had researched Upham. We can talk a little bit later about narrowing the searches again, but right now, if you're looking at just Upham and you want to look at all those boards, you can look at all those different messages and the threads that, or the messages that are in those threads to see what might apply to the person or family that you're researching. I mentioned the categories. You know, when I started playing with this, I was trying to find different categories, and I came up with immigration, I came up with emigration, I came up with prisons. But really, when it comes to categories, there's all sorts of different categories that are listed here that you click on it and you will be given lots of different leads on different types of records. So I've been working with some people on adoption I clicked on adoption. There's 9 subcategories on there. Some of them, one of them is DNA. One of them is looking for the parents, looking for the mother, looking for the father, looking for the children. I have a birth date given at a certain time. What do I do next? So there's lots of different categories in here that can provide lots of help, giving you leads on where to look for things, not necessarily just on a specific family, but on other resource techniques. And I think it's a really good, I think it reminded me by having to go back and look at this, how good a resource it is for when you're looking for some way to get over a brick wall, if there are people out there willing to help you. The other category here that's important is the location categories. And I'm going to just kind of skip through this real quick because unfortunately, Wisconsin and Wood are at the bottom of the list, and I didn't want to go through all these lists. But what you have an opportunity to do with the categories in location is to pick the United States or any of the other locations that are appropriate for you. We go to the United States. We want to look at all 50, well, they have 51 states down, but we want to look at the states. And they bring up an alphabetical listing. And again, Wisconsin's way down toward the bottom. You scroll down to the bottom and then you click on the counties, and Wood County's way down at the bottom. So you click on the counties and scroll down. And then you get to Wood County's page. And specifically what you're looking for or looking at is the Wood County Family History and Genealogy message board. And again, because I like to do research on Mr. Upham, I type in the name Upham, and I see that in Wood County, there are 17 records for the Upham surname. And now I didn't look just for William Upham, I looked for the Upham surname. And what it did was it pulled up William H. Upham as being the post commander for the James G. Blaine Grand Army of the Republic. It mentions Governor Upham. It mentions his third cousin, George Upham, who was an undertaker in Marshfield. And then someone who worked for the Upham Furniture Company. But you get a feeling that it narrowed the search down specifically to families in Wood County that were related to my Upham family or the Upham family that I was researching. Now, one of the things that I thought was kind of just surprising was when I was looking at this search, I noticed that I responded to someone's post back in 2004. Goes to show you how old I am and how long I've been doing this. But anyway, someone wrote a post saying, hello, I'm hoping someone can help me. I'm looking for a family in Wood County, Wisconsin by the name of Young. I found them on the 1890 census, and it looks like this. Minnie was a dressmaker, or Minnie was the head of a house. She was a widow at 26. And then there was her 3 children, Jenny, Zilda, and Robert. And then it talks about Minnie was a dressmaker. Her husband had died, and she was trying to help a grandson of Zilda's find out more about the family. It's a small world. Jenny married my great-great-uncle Wallace, or not Jenny, Minnie married my great-great-uncle Wallace. And so I had a bunch of information that I could share with her. And so I replied to the post. Now, if we were using the screen on the left, the library edition, I couldn't reply to it. But because I have my account, you can actually reply. And so if you look over in the circle, the little arrow to the left is the reply button. The little flag is if you want to report something wrong with that particular post. And then you could also print it. What happens with the message boards today on Library Edition, Ancestry Library Edition, is that you can see the post, you can print the post, but you can't necessarily reply to the post. So anyway, what I wanted to demonstrate here was one of the things that's really good about Ancestry, or at the time this was done, it was probably done on RootsWeb, was that as people posted a question, people would come up and reply or provide answers. And so the first 2 columns on the left here are the response that I sent to her about her family. And it talks about Lumina, talks about the fact that Thomas had died, that she married my uncle Wallace, gave Tom's obituary, his death certificate. Then one of my third cousins had written a story for the Marshfield History book in 1997. I included the text for that, and it talks about Robert, or Jean, Isilda, and Robert and the family, and then the kids that he and the kids that Wallace and Lumina had after they married, the fact that he went to the state of Washington and died out there, and then some other information about the next generations of the kids. So there was information that I could provide because I was short-tail relative. On the next 2 pages, next 3 pages that are listed there, that's only one of 3 other posts that were provided by a woman who works on the Wood County Roots website. And she was always really good at replying and providing information. And you can see she went through the birth index, the death index, the 1880 census, the 1900 census, and it goes on for 3 pages of family members or potential family members that may be important to this family in their research. She always ended it by saying she's not related to the family, but this is an example of what some people are willing to do for people that they just want to help. And I think of all the things that I remember about genealogy is that it always seems like there are people out there wanting to help others do research. So that's kind of where I'm going to drop or stop with message boards. I think if you haven't used message boards, this would be a good chance to go in there and play with it and see what you can find for your family names. Or if you want to look for a certain topic, go to the topic categories and see what you can find there. The next, back up to the navigation bar, the next over to the left was the search box. And you can do a basic search with Ancestry, or you can do an advanced search. The basic search, how that works is you just put in a name, a location, and a date of birth. And you almost need to do that because everybody's name gets repeated. So there's lots of different William H. Uphams, for example. His son was William H. Upham, born in 1916. Mr. Upham was born in 1841. There's other William Uphams that could show up when you do a search. So you want to put down enough information to kind of narrow it down when it comes to the results. Now, when you do the basic search, you're really just doing a search for what Ancestry considers their most popular databases, the things that are most likely going to provide results for people, grab their attention. And so in this case, I did a search for William H. Upham, Marshfield, Wood County, Wisconsin, and I put his date of birth as 1841. If you don't know a person's specific birth date, they have this little calculator behind the birth year, and you can click on it. It brings up the line that says he, she was about and such an age, years old in. So if you think about, you have a census record that says that someone was 70 years old in 1950, that must, well, let's do 1940. That would mean that he was probably born about 1870. And so it's just an easy way of estimating a person's date of birth to put in there, and it helps narrow the search results. So you're looking for people of approximately the right time. So we did the basic search for William Upham, and one of the things that shows up is you get a whole list of things. And we've got newspapers.com sharing obituaries, marriage records, death, burial, cemetery. We have a census from England. We have a federal census. We have a state census. So one of the things about this basic search is you get just a kind of a hodgepodge of results. And when you're first starting out, that maybe works well because you're finding all sorts of things and you get all excited about it. But as you go along on your research, you're really going to want to start to narrow your search or focus your search so you get more specific results to fill in holes that you develop over time on your particular ancestor or relative that you're doing research on. And so they have what's referred to, oh, I got to do this first. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to pick a couple of these records and actually take you and show them to you, mentioning that this can be used either in the library or at home. When you find a record, you have the option of sending it home. So let's say I'm sitting at the library right now using Ancestry Library Edition, and I pull up William H. Upham, and this is a newspaper account of his death in 1924. And it doesn't let me look at the actual image because the image for the paper that came out of is behind a paywall. But they have the index information there. And if I want to send that home, all I have to do is click on the send document, and it will bring up a box that looks like this, and you have to put in your email address, and you have to put it in twice. At the library, you get very good at, what I tend to do is I tend to save it someplace where I can just copy and paste in there, so I'm not typing it over and over, and then you hit send email. Another record that I saw that I wanted to make a copy of, I had the record open, and when the record is open, you see up in the upper right-hand corner the box that says save. You can either send the image home or save to the computer. Since you're able to access these records for the time being on your own computer at home, you can say save to the computer. But again, if you wanted to send this image to your house or to your email address, from the library, you just click on that send image home. What it will do is it will bring up that same box, and once the record is sent, it will say success, the record was sent, and it was sent to the email that you have listed. And then when you get home, you open up your email, and it gives you a link to what they refer to as My Discoveries. And you can open this up, and it shows that I found this North Carolina marriage record. If I want to download the image, I can click download the image. If I want to just look at the record, the print part of it, I can click print friendly. And then I have an obituary that I sent home. And because there was no image with that, I can only print the image. And so what I end up with is, this is what downloaded from the website. This was the image that I sent home for the marriage record. And because the other record was just an index, it sent it home looking like this for his obituary that appeared in the La Crosse newspaper. So getting records from the library or saving them to your computer at home are really easy using Ancestry Library Edition. Now, if you want to do what they call the advanced search, you can toggle just by going to this little line next to the basic search box. You click on that, and it will open up the opportunity to look for different types of links. So, for example, we know William H. Upham. We have his first and last name. We have his date of birth. If we're looking for a specific location where he lived, we could put down Marshfield, Wisconsin. We could put down Kewanee, because when he got out of the service in 1869, he lived in Kewanee in 1870. Then he moved to Angelica, Wisconsin for a few years, so we could put down Angelica, Wisconsin. And then in 1878, he came to Marshfield. We also know that he was born in Westminster, Massachusetts, so we could put Westminster, Massachusetts in for different places where people lived. And if you look at the across where it says add an event, you can click on any of those links and it will add a line for it. So birth, you only have one birth date, so you can put that in once. If you want to, you can put in more than one marriage. If you want to put in more than one lived in, you can put in more than one lived in. If you want to add family members, father, mother, sibling, spouse, child, you just click on them and it will end up recreating the form for when you do your search. So here's what I did, and I just opened them all up. I didn't fill it all in, but what you can do is you can open these up, add the boxes, and put the information in, and then when you do your search, it will give you different sets of results. I will say that sometimes less is more. So when you start doing these searches, unless you're looking for something in particular that you want to try to focus it to look at a certain set of records, looking at less information might help you. But if you're trying to pinpoint something, for example, in the state of North Carolina, where you got married in 1915, you want to make sure you have in there someplace that connection to North Carolina. Okay. Oops. Now, I was just going to add pictures, but I think you want my picture. So that's kind of the search categories thing. And then what I wanted to also point out was that when you go to search, the search box here, drop down box by the search, you can drop down and come up with different filters already put in place. You can search it or filter on the census and voter list. You can do it on the left here. You can go over to the right column where it says special collections and click on that. And it does the same thing. It adds filters to just look at census records. You go down to the birth and marriages, so the second one on the drop-down box under search, it does the same thing as you would find on the first one on the right-hand column. So you can see how things are duplicated to make it easier to find things and do the search. And then the last one that's really important is the card catalog. We talked a little bit about the card catalog, but it's always important to go through and look at that list of databases and try to find what database might hold the answer to a certain type of record. Sometimes it means going through there and finding that there is a record that exists that you have to browse page by page to find something. But for example, if you were to look for Mr. Upham's marriage record from 1915 and have to go to North Carolina, you could search through that document page by page until you find it just by browsing through it. Family historians or genealogists tend to remember that sometimes the search is tedious, but it's always worth it. All right, now getting close to the end here. One of the shout outs I want to make is that when you do research, you really want to be focusing your research, and one of the best ways to do that is to work from a timeline. Now, this is actually from my Ancestry account, my subscription to Ancestry. I have a family tree on there for Mr. Upham and his family. And what the facts page does is it basically creates a timeline. Now, I created timelines with Excel spreadsheets. I've created timelines as Word documents. It's just a matter of putting events in a chronological order and then using it to kind of tell or follow what needs to be filled in yet. So with this one, for example, I have just looking at the census records for Mr. Upham. I said that you really want to try to find census records for every 10 years federal census records for every 10 years while a person was living. Mr. Upham was born in 1841, so we want to find 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 10, and 1900, 10, and 1920. And you can see, looking at this list, that I've got a couple gaps. And the reason there are gaps there is because when you did a search for William Upham, the basic search, it didn't come up. And so what you have to do is you have to think about how you go about finding it. And so what you do is you develop a research plan. And you want to ask yourself, the question is, what do you want to learn? What do you want to find out? And in the case for William and Mary, I'm going to use the 1910 federal census as an example. You want to find them listed on the 1910 federal census. So what's going to help you find that information is knowing what you already know. You want to go down and say, well, what do you know about the Uphams in 1910? Well, you know, they were in 1900, they were at 212 West 3rd Street. In 1920, Mr. Upham is still at 212 West 3rd Street. So you should be able to find them on 212 West 3rd Street. You know, Mrs. Upham died. You know, they spent time in Florida. They had a home in Florida that they would spend winters at. Maybe that they got recorded down there, because when the census was recorded, it depended on where a person was living. So you kind of have to think about those kinds of things and then think about where you're going to find it. So the third part of it is to say, okay, so how or where might I find this 1910 federal census record. Well, we searched for William and Mary Upham, did a basic search. We could change the search from William to Will or WM or WH to see if there was an abbreviation or a nickname used on the census record. You could forget about searching for William Upham altogether and search for Mary Upham. Sometimes you'll can't find an individual, the head of the household, but you can find a spouse or a child, and so that might work. One of the favorite ones that I've always remembered, and this is a tip that a fellow genealogy group member told me once, Kathleen Engelbretson. She said, if you can't find them by their last name, just look for them by their first name. And so you could look for William and Mary to see what you turn up. You could look for alternate spellings that you might have run across. And these are all things that I found Mr. Upham listed at. Or you could pull up the Marshfield census and go through it line by line to see if you could find them, or the Florida census and see if you can find them down there. Or you could search for relatives and things. So those are all kind of research strategies on what you could do. So I'm lazy. Let's do the easy one first. And so we did a search for Mr. Upham. And if you look over here on the left-hand side, the search filters that were used, I searched for William, born in 1841, born in Massachusetts, living in Marshfield, Wisconsin, with a male with a spouse named Mary. And I put her middle initial down, Mary Cornelia. And if you look up on the top here, the first one, William H. Wylam. Now, Wylam doesn't sound anything like Upham, but we go to look at the census record and click on it. What am I doing? There we go. This is the census from 1910 for 212 West 3rd Street. And down here at the bottom, the search was for William H. Upham, so his is in yellow. And you can see William H. and that's about all that was there. So whoever was doing the index this is William Wylam. His wife is listed as Mary Wylam, and Mr. Upham's sister-in-law, Ella Kelly, was there, and she's listed as Ella Koa. Lots of times when it comes to census records, depending on the penmanship or how clear they are, things are misinterpreted. And this is one of those cases that the census didn't show up when you did a search for Upham because it wasn't indexed under Upham. And so that was a strategy that worked, just looking for the family based on first names only. Now, as time goes on, one of the things that's happened is you fill in all the spaces. And you can see on this list now that 1850 through 1920, all of the census records were found for Mr. and Mrs. Upham. Mrs. Upham died in 1912, so when you look at 1920, instead of finding the first Mrs. Upham, you find the second Mrs. Upham. But what this does with this particular timeline and by using the program on Ancestry is it documents the sources. And one of the things I want to really emphasize is that when you're doing family history, you want to document your sources all the time. This works really nice. But I did family history for a lot of years before having a program on Ancestry or a computer program. You can do it by hand. Those forms that you saw before that were available on the library edition are really key to doing that. They give you a good place to record the information so you can go back and find it again. And I know I've been talking for quite a while, and I think that it's important to say I just skimmed the surface. There are 10,000 different databases here that we could spend an awful lot of time talking about the records that are available through the library edition alone. It's a great platform with lots of information. I hope you try it. If you haven't got a subscription, now is the time to try it and see what you can find out. I know it's not as convenient sometimes when you find records because you have to send them home or download them. You can't just save them to a genealogy program in the library edition, but it's worth the effort. And I would suggest that, if you start looking, because there's so much available on Ancestry, don't let it overwhelm you. If you get stuck, my email address is at the bottom of the screen. Send me an email. I'll be glad to try to see what I can do to help. And when the library gets back to being open and this pandemic goes away, I will be back in the library on Tuesdays from 10 to 2. And I always look forward to sitting and talking to people and answering questions. And with that, if there are any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Don, I don't see any questions in the chat room. A question popped up earlier about newspaper availability on Ancestry, and I think you'll be covering that next time with Heritage Quest.
Well, actually, newspapers.com is owned by Ancestry, and they've been putting more and more newspaper clippings themselves into the database for Ancestry. So if you think about when I pulled up the Upham, there was newspapers.com. Sometimes I get frustrated looking at that. If I want to look at newspapers.com, I can look at newspapers.com on my own rather than have it come up on the Ancestry account. But Ancestry does own it, and they are adding them to the web page. The problem with Ancestry and newspapers.com is they have certain portions of it that are public and certain portions that are put behind a paywall. And when it comes to that part that's behind the paywall, that happens to be where Marshfield's at. And so if you want to look at Marshfield newspapers, they usually show up with an index only. Actually, it looks like it's mostly Gannett papers. Whereas papers that are published by other publishers that are involved with the newspapers.com you have access to them directly, and the images on Ancestry too.
Were there any other questions? You can type them in the chat. Linda says to everyone, thank you for doing this. It was very informative.
Hi, Linda. I know a lot of the people that are probably watching are people I know. I would love to be able to see everybody at the library for meetings again. But in the meantime, we're going to try to do this for a while, and I hope that that you can come back every month and participate this way at least.
Well, if we don't have any other questions, we can wrap up. I appreciate everyone coming. Lots of thank yous, and I can't wait to meet everyone in person too. I have a full genealogy on the Porter side of my family, but I've got 3 others I need to tackle. So I look forward to learning more.
Oh, we have a good resource at the Marshfield Public Library, so when you can get in there. Thanks everybody for coming. I will see you around eventually. So stay safe and happy Thanksgiving.
Take care.